both, the two of us, we're both a lot more rigid. We're a lot more like, we're still figuring it out. We're a little more uncomfortable.
I have a theory about this. So I think I mentioned this earlier, and I think it is age. Your dad explained to a friend who came to him at the party, what does your
I want to
son
be a fly on the wall.
Oh my god.
What did your dad say?
It was so bad, Anika. I felt like he was not ashamed, but it was just so hard because we were like walking in the park multiple times. I've come back from Boston. I'm doing this thing that's maybe kind of working out. So he would brief me first. You say you do media. Say nothing more. I was like, no, but I do podcasts. I was like, no. You do media. I was like, but journalism. You know the reputation of journalists in our city? No, don't say that. Say media.
So you have, I mean, it's a mix from what you're saying.
Yeah.
Subjects that you're interested in, but you do think about your target audience. You also do think about the YouTube algorithm in terms of how many views you're going to get. Is that a factor a little bit?
Not officially.
Unofficially, it is.
Of course it is. Don't lie.
If I were to lie, I would probably say.
If I were to lie.
Okay. Hi everyone, and welcome to Don't Run Into Glass, a podcast hosted by thecitizen.in. I'm Gayathi.
And I'm Anika.
And Anika, what are we chatting about today?
Today we are talking to a guy who identifies as a YouTuber. His pronouns are you and tuber.
Anika, I don't think you're allowed to say that, you know. I think you're making this is a little offensive.
Okay, on serious note, we're talking to a great podcaster, someone who I have recorded with before, Vinamre Kasanaa, who runs Dostcast. Catch it on YouTube, all over Instagram, all over all the platforms. He interviews fantastic people, almost forming kind of a subculture.
Are you saying that because you were one of the guests on his podcast?
Yes. Yes.
Well, welcome.
Hi,
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be on Don't Run Into Glass. And for my Gen Z folks, skirt, gang, what's up?
Guys, I'm feeling very old already.
We have subtitles. We will have subtitles for that, okay?
But now, I just want you guys to know that YouTuber is a legit profession. It is, right?
Yeah, it is.
And is that what, would you define yourself
I
as?
started
Is that
off-
how you identify?
I hate that, TBH, because I think a lot of extra work gets attached to being a YouTuber, such as sitting in front of a computer for long hours, editing and saying, hey, what's up fam, thanks for 200K. As much as I do that as a part of my life, I don't like associating with that. I call myself a part-time YouTuber because really I just do my work and then I do other things, follow my interests. It's just that it's become full-time because that's where I make my bread and butter from. That's it.
And you've seen exponential growth in, like, we spoke to you actually briefly about a month or so ago.
Yeah.
And you told us about the amount of subs you had. I mean, this is the language that's the
What?
this is
Yeah.
Subscribers, audience.
How many subs do you have? Yeah. So, but you've seen an exponential growth in like literally 30 days.
Yeah.
Right?
And how much has that been?
It's been about 120K, 100K.
And that's just in a month?
That's just in a month.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Give us your tips and tricks.
My secret sauce. My secret sauce is we never miss an upload no matter what. We've been uploading every single day since November 12th, 2021. Barring 1 or 2 days where we had to delete something. And that's usually a short format. There's a whole debate on YouTube about, oh, you know, algorithms are very manipulative. You can't figure them out. But we've seen that with consistent uploading at the same time and clickbaiting people and actually having conversations that India cares about, you can grow. Should not be a problem. And also being very thick-skinned about the hate that comes your way, because most of our clips are, well, they're out of context, and people like to shit on them. And if you can handle that, but most people can't handle the hate. I think everyone can grow on YouTube, realistically, if they've got some things right. It's just the hate and the numbers and all of that that gets to their head, and then they're like, I'm quitting, guys, I'm leaving, I need a break, yada, yada, yada.
But is hate part of the virality and the success and the numbers? It's inevitable.
Virality is polarizing by definition, right? So as soon as it's polarizing, there's going to be people who do not like what they see on their screen. And the cost of a comment is 0 rupees, right? You could be sitting on your shitter and like just scrolling through stuff. You see something or like, bakwas, and then that
True,
goes up.
Anika, you do that. You have to admit you do that. Maybe not on YouTube, but on Instagram, you've admitted to the fact that you've just been in a mood and you've gone to people's accounts and just like posted crap, like
Don't
posted
you
nasty
dare
comments.
out me like this, okay? Don't you dare out me like this.
So it is a thing, like suddenly it puts it all in perspective, because I was judging these faceless and nameless trolls, and then I realized that I know.
A lot of people do it. A lot of people have anon accounts. I'm not sure if you did it from Delhi houses or your other account.
How dare you say that? Listen, guys, don't be harsh, okay? Mercury ka retrograde chal raha hai.
Ye kya baat
Okay? It's just an off day, okay? Don't start pulling out things from the grave for me, okay? I'm triggered.
Yeah,
all
but
the young people
on
over
a
there.
serious note, I of course saw your podcast when Anika was a guest there. And look at her, she's again being very cool and chill today. I think it's your influence. But the one thing that I noticed on that episode was that Anika was like very relaxed. She was funny. She was of course smart and intelligent, which she is. But on our podcast, both the two of us, we're both a lot more rigid. We're a lot more like, we're still figuring it out. We're a little more uncomfortable.
I have a theory about this. So I think I mentioned this earlier, and I think it is age. I think it is like we are like a panel discussion generation who's like seen more serious conversation happen in a panel discussion format, whereas him, who is like a decade younger than us, although he doesn't.
As I've been told 6 times before.
Yeah. He comes up with this, because that's what happened to me. He comes up with this really relaxing sort of energy, offers you food and just, and then you feel a little bit more chilled out.
But that is my question. Like, what do you do to get your guests comfortable enough to have a conversation that is both funny and engaging and would like interest your audience for a span of, let's say, whatever, hour or however long your episodes are?
Gayati, it's God's gift.
Guys, I mean... You pull up yourself here for sure.
God's gift.
I honestly don't know, but I will say to Anika's theory, I am far more chill on someone else's podcast as a guest. I think no matter how chill you are as a host, or you have a fun podcast where you're having a sip of a wine or whatever, just the pressure of hosting that is always existing in the background, because you're responsible for curating the conversation, right? Whereas as a guest, you're literally put on, so you can say whatever you want. All the podcasts that I go on in person, easily over 2 hours. With drinks involved, I'm having a blast. I'm never as open on my own podcast, because I am supposed to keep the conversation going.
Yeah.
As far as making the guests comfortable, I think one, it's in person. I think most podcasts still in India, they're largely on Zoom. Second, I don't really have an agenda. I don't think about, what meaty insight can I get from this person, and then, that'll give me views or something like that. And third, it's just like, it also stems from my own curiosity. When I read her LinkedIn, for example, I learned that she's interested in Japan. She's an Indologist. I met her at the art fair, and so there are things that I could never ask her in a regular conversation, because that would be pretty nerdy, right? Like, Anika, please tell me about, spend the next 2 hours and tell me about Japan. But in a public conversation, you can kind of do that. So, I mean, I really just chase my curiosity with whoever is on the podcast. That could be a comedian, that could be someone like Anika, anyone else, yeah.
But that was another thing that we were talking about, like your guest selection. It seems like you're kind of like almost chronicling or building India's subculture. Like, you're sort of choosing your guests to identify in a certain way. And I mean, we've noticed that. Is that conscious, or is that just something that you've just picked up subjects that you're interested in? Because you do have a very interesting selection of
not only just subjects, but also like people. Like, it's like sometimes like, I remember I saw his podcast with Puneet Superstar, right?
Yeah.
And he also came to this art opening where I first time saw him speak.
Yeah.
And he basically speaks as to how, in popular media, the rattling out of the menu in a dhaba happens, palak paneer, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da.
Like a hawker or a guy in a train.
Exactly, right? So he has that voice, but then he kind of disses. So he interviewed this person, and that podcast was about a lot of ridiculousness, but at the same time also like, dude, you made a profession out of smashing birthday cakes on your face. Such an interesting choice of a person, and that guy is a massive influencer, so it's also the choice in people as along with the themes. I mean, how did you, arrive at this concoction?
When I first started podcasting, I think I was trying to imitate the guys in the West, predominantly Joe Rogan and Tim Ferriss, and less Joe Rogan and more Ferriss. And I had the assumption that my podcast should be about interviewing top high performers in fields. when you come back to India, those top high performers are just boring CEOs. Nothing against CEOs, but it's just like, how many times do I want to discuss how you build your 100 crore business? That conversation gets repetitive. But I, like just like everyone else, I also had guilty pleasures like Puneet Superstar and other people. And I figured that no one is giving these guys a platform. Foolish as I am, I can at least try. And then it blew up from there. The second thing is that I still think any kind of host or, okay, so podcast hosts now, the few people that are there, they still borrow their chops from news anchors, which is pretty bad because, those people have journalistic training, they have a beat to follow, they have constraints. When you have none of that, there is no reason to follow exactly what they did. You can just literally pick up someone on the street and have a conversation. You have that. So I just think I saw what this medium could do, and I really just went all in on that. And Puneet Superstar is one example. On the other hand, there's this funny English teacher called Gaurav Motive Groom, where he just has a hilarious video sketch. Then at the end, he gives the meaning of a word for like people who don't know how to speak English. And then he's like, for more videos, follow Gaurav Motive Groom. He's a proper English teacher. He came on and we had a 2-hour conversation. That was fun. Is that something that you would watch? Probably not. Is that something that, say, someone who's looking to podcast for inspiration and gyan watch? Not necessarily. But people who are like at 2 a.m. strolling around, bored, they would love that stuff. And so I also have a background in advertising. I studied advertising in college. So I do think about TGs as well. It's stupid to only just have one TG, one target group. I'm only going to cater to Gen Z. Hey guys, let's talk about mental health today. Or look at my t-shirt. That's kind of like, I don't like to box myself in.
Yeah, so you have, it's a mix from what you're saying.
Yeah.
In subjects that you're interested in, but you do think about your target audience. You also do think about the YouTube algorithm in terms of how many views you're going to get. Is that a factor a little bit?
Not officially.
Not officially. Unofficially it is.
Of course it is. Don't lie.
If I were to lie, I would probably say...
If I were to lie.
Okay.
So, if I were to really, really do what the audience wants, I would get Puneet Superstar on every single day because that's the number one comment I get.
Dude, he is so funny.
Right? The second thing I would do is I would talk to all CAs and engineering people and IAS, UPSC people because that is what India loves to hear, right? This country really wants government jobs. This country wants to crack engineering exams. This country wants to know how to become a CA. I will do that all day. But I have skin in the game for none of these, right? So if I do that, it's going to be me faking it. So how do you crack IAS? I'm not interested in that because I've never done that. So I do try to make sure that the Venn diagram is something what people want, but then also what I'm interested in, right? If I talk to a physicist, I'm going to give full disclaimers that, hey, I'm stupid. I studied commerce without math. So we're going to start from there.
Without math. Take a second for that.
Yeah, because that's something Anika and I have struggled with. Like, we sometimes sort of like get into this mode where we're choosing people that are interesting to us. And they're potentially not that interesting to a wider audience. Maybe we need to rethink that a little bit.
Yeah.
So you maybe would be somebody who would be interesting to us, but also to a wider audience. So maybe we're in the right direction now.
Yeah.
I'm both English and Hindi
now. But I want to ask you now, leading from this conversation, apart from making these videos, what else do you do?
I just have fun.
Just have fun.
I just try to read nowadays.
How rude! How rude!
It's a good ambition in
We have
life.
living beings to take care of, dog, baby.
No, I will say, Anika, I spent the last 10 months doing just this, and I punted most weekends, right? The India Art Fair and one family trip being the only exception. I did this 7 days in a row. But then I went to Zero Valley Festival, and I had turned off my phone, and I really kind of like had this awakening, like Julia Roberts, or like some film where people discover the meaning of life, and I was like, all this work is BS. Itna kaam nahi karna. So then I figured out like a good work-life balance where I do my work, but then I also want to do what any other 25-year-old would do, just get stupid drunk or like travel and all of that, because most of my colleagues, they do this full-time 7 days a week, and I don't want to be that lashed into the sentiments of my audience, or like, I don't want to be podcaster like 24/7, because you can be that 24/7.
That's the other sort of trailing question from that. Where do you sort of draw the line between living for your audience and getting consumed by this, I need to upload every Tuesday, every Friday, what is my audience thinking, and that virtual identity versus your like real offline identity, you know? Like we use the term IRL now, like as in it's almost an aberration, right? Like it's a thing like in real life.
Yeah.
And I think that's the difference between maybe our generation, because Anika and I still grew up at a time where we remember the shift from to digital, right?
Analog
we
to digital,
we were,
right?
you know, we didn't grow up with like computers and laptops and things like that.
So,
You
so did I,
guys-
by the way. My first phone was at 12 years of age.
Yeah, but for you
Really?
guys,
That was really young. I got it once I blackmailed my parents.
yeah, much later.
Yeah, I said
Phones
I'm going
were
for
not a thing.
nationals, basketball. Please give me a phone. I could get kidnapped. And that's when they gave it to me.
Yeah, but that's the thing. So for you, like especially since your work, your success, your identity to a certain degree is online, how do you sort of switch off? Do you switch off?
I switch off now, but it was very difficult because I would go to social gatherings and then people, it still happens, people recognize me and then like, I love your show, I love this episode, it still happens and I'm like, oh great, so I came here to kind of like let loose and now I'm thinking about it again and then people will just talk to me about work, you know, which is fine I guess, but because, you know, it's also a sign of success that people want to come and speak to you.
Yeah.
I have two phones now. One is a work phone that
That's
everyone
a true
has.
sign of success, by the way.
What?
When you have two phones.
I don't know.
You gotta get one of those belts, you know, where you put the phone.
Well,
I think
yeah, the
people
old
will stop
businessman.
watching his.
I should also get a
podcast.
Bluetooth in my
Yeah.
ears.
Yeah.
So I have two phones. One is for my family, and that only has Instagram and Spotify. That's it. The other phone is a shitty OnePlus 8T with a cracked screen, so I already don't want to be on it, and I turn it off at night. I'm semi-successful at it. When I'm out and about, I use that phone. The second thing I do is now I've become very particular about scheduling like leisure. And as far as the uploads are concerned, that used to be a problem way back in the day. Thankfully, my team is, I would say, they're all supermen. Everyone knows their job. They do it extremely well. Our only motto is to upload Tuesday and Friday, 12 p.m. Indian Standard Time. I can say that in my sleep and so can they. And so we batch record. And everyone knows their jobs, what to do, and they have autonomy on how the episode looks like, whatever. I don't interfere. The biggest problem was all of these YouTube creators, they're very taste-centric. Like they don't want to delegate taste because, you know, taste is a very hard thing to delegate because, you know, for example, why don't you make this painting for me? But it's not the same, right? You would make something different. But once I got past that, life became a lot easier. And so it was about just making leaders in my team, like to lead their own departments and do what they want, because it looks very easy, but running a YouTube channel and a subsequent business from that is tough in the sense that you have to be, your face has to be in a video every single day, not only just one platform, but several different platforms. And if you're the one doing it and recording, you're going to get to a place where your inspiration or your creative juices are going to run out. Because then you're going to be doing operational stuff. And I hate doing operational stuff. I hate making invoices. That's the next thing I'm going to delegate, right? Eventually, I just want to be like this Mark Zuckerberg-like character, just like come out from the wilderness, do my bidding, and then go back.
So you do have another business. You don't just chill besides the podcast.
The
Tell us a
podcast
little
is
bit
a
more
business.
about this business. What is it that you do?
Well, there's a YouTube channel management thing that we do for a few other people, right? Which is quite hectic. It's one thing to do, run your own show, and the other thing is to run an agency. It's a lot of like back and forth and stress. So we've minimized it to people we can manage. And of course, there's brand deals and other stuff that comes from YouTube. Yeah.
How did your parents react when you told them I want to be a YouTuber?
I never said that.
Then how did you
What did you
phrase
say
it?
to them?
Well, it all started before college. I wanted to go study writing or literature. I knew that was never going to happen because I was going abroad to Boston to study. I could never say I'm going to go to study to be a writer, right? So I said I'm going to be in advertising, which was like a happy medium between money and writing, right? From there, I was like, I'm doing content. This will eventually work into something. It wasn't working into something, and my mom was saying, you should get a job. You know, you've come back from college. And people would often say this thing to me. My parents are very supportive, by the way. Other people would say, bro, your degree, how much it cost? And they would ask me, I was like, this much. I was like, oh, bro, you're just wasting your life. That happened a lot, which was quite painful in those times, but I persevered, like all great success stories that you hear on TED Talks and Joe's Talks. Now, with online success and my relatives and my extended family and friends getting my clips on WhatsApp, it's all changed. Now I have free reign to be as debaucherous as possible because this worked,
Yeah.
you know, and it's very weird. Like I know several people for whom this YouTube thing did not work out. Yeah, so I mean, they've been very supportive, but they're gloating and proud now. That's the difference.
Yeah, I think that's sort of a key thing for even the previous generation to see like new professions and new mediums come up and accept that. It's quite a change. But how have you grown? Like, what was your first podcast? Can you tell us a little bit about your first episode?
My first, I had several failed episodes. I'm not even sure what those were like because they were mostly recorded under the influence when I was in college. Because I thought that was what podcasting was. It was supposed to be this like, philosophical bati and just, go from there. But my first real episode that went online was with this friend of mine. His name is John Arciero. He fashioned himself after Arnold Schwarzenegger and all those guys. He's a classical bodybuilder, like unlike a lean body that you would see, and he was very passionate about that. So I got him on. This podcast was called the Vitruvian Man podcast after the Leonardo da Vinci drawing. It's just like very pretentious. But I was trying, to my credit, and so we spoke about fitness and bodybuilding and all those things, and that was it.
And so was that a subject you were interested in, or you were like people would be interested in?
I was interested in the fact that he was articulate.
Okay.
And that he could speak about it passionately.
Yeah.
Because you might not be so interested in something, but if someone speaks about it like they really, really are like deep in that field, it becomes fun to talk about it.
That's another thing that I've noticed, excuse me, on your podcast, where you really do choose quite articulate people. Like your podcasts are long.
Yeah.
But they are the kind of podcast, like I have started listening to that podcast, like how I listen to the other podcasts in India, like Tanmay Bhat and all, something in the background, right?
Yeah.
And you get fairly articulate people over there. So I've noticed that. And that speaks to really well to you documenting that subculture as well. But I wanted to ask a funny question.
Please.
So when you were explaining to your parents what you're doing, what kind of questions did your parents come up with to understand better?
My dad is old real estate, like cred. So he's like, "Are you going to be a journalist?" That was that. And then I think the hard part is just explaining that I'm doing extended interviews. But it shifted once the word podcasting came into the mainstream after COVID, right?
Yeah.
Suddenly, all this extra information that they had about me clicked because the mainstream was throwing it back at them. Before that, like just standard, like
how did your dad explain to a friend who came to him at a party? What does your
I want to
son
be a fly on the wall.
Oh my God.
What did your dad say?
It was so bad, Anika. I felt
Like
he was not ashamed, but it was just so hard because we were like walking in a park multiple times. I've come back from Boston. I'm doing this thing that's maybe kind of working out. So he would brief me first. You say you do media. Say nothing more. I was like, no, but I do podcasts. I was like, no. You do media. I was like, but journalism. Do you know what the reputation of journalists in our city? No, don't say that. Say media. And then the conversation after that would just be, no matter what I would say, the uncle at the opposite end would never be satisfied. He would just leave with a confused look. And so then that shifted. I mean, he still does say long form interviews, but then he mentions the prominent guests. And he watches all those casts. So what's that?
How good for you. Yeah.
And like you said, now that you do have some success, they're not just sort of, they haven't just come around, but they're like, fans, right? Like they're probably the ones that are.
Because I kind of sometimes just want to like go and be me at home, sitting here and just like, hey, how's it going? Let's talk about domestic affairs, It's like, oh, we saw you are now at this many subs. Good job. It's like, oh, great. I just turned off my phone. Now I have to think about it again. My grandmother, I love her, but she is the most horrible fan. Because horrible as in like, I might be like thinking about, oh my God, I fucking hate my life. I just want to take a break. Like one of those days when you're having, there's like, did you see your subs? No.
Does your grandma say subs?
Yeah, subscribers. And she, by the way, when this was not working out, she would just constantly say, I watch all these other vloggers. I know you're a niche kind of guy, but this isn't working out. Now she's completely in my camp. And I'm like...
But that must be nice, right? It must be a good feeling to see your family come around from a point of like...
But I have a studio that is outside my house and then it's my house. Yeah. And like I carry that separation in every part of my life. when I come back and I have to hear about the stuff that I do, I love my stuff, right? But like, it's like you still want to talk to your family. So I've negotiated certain things, like let's not talk about this. When I talk about it, then we'll talk about it. You don't talk about it.
Yeah.
And they have to comply.
Interesting.
I have a related question. You know, when I asked you that question about what do you do to make your guests feel comfortable, like earlier when we were talking, you said something about you were shooting with someone and you gave them focus pills.
Yeah.
Now, is this a thing? Like, do you
No.
offer
What
your
is
guests
focus
substances?
Look, there's been good experiences and bad experiences. Let's just say with getting people comfortable. I gave a guest a substance I will not name, and I also took that substance. Shit got so vulnerable for that person that they decided this is not going to go out. And it was probably the best conversation I've had in like months. So there's that as well. There can be too much comfort. But no, I mean, look, if someone is famished and they come to my house, and out of politeness, they're like, hey, it's okay, I haven't had any food, but it's okay, it's fine. I'm like, yeah, no problem, let's start.
Yeah.
It's going to be like a douchey move, so I make sure I have some snacks, some coffee. If they want to smoke.
in his defense.
Wait, 1 second. I want to know, did you take any focus pills?
No.
I have never.
She just took the usual Anika dosage or whatever she takes.
Okay.
Positivity
That's
and
fine.
early morning walks. Early morning walks. No,
Got it.
but in his defense, like when I did come to his podcast, right? He was so organized. Like he sent me the talking points. He's like, broadly, we'll talk about these things, but it's a long podcast, so we'll see where it goes. And then when I came, he's like, what would beverage of choice? He's like, I have lassi, I have this, I have that. And I was like, okay, I will have lassi. And then we hung out and we, did
Indulged
the podcast.
in the Anika substances. Got it.
Of course.
And then we recorded the podcast and we had a great home cooked meal, and yeah, his mom makes amazing pickles. So he's like, oh yeah, my mom makes pickles. I was like, I'm into that.
Yeah, because the reason why I'm asking this question is because I assume a few people that are tuning in are probably considering starting their podcast or are wondering about what goes into starting a podcast. And I guess this is an important takeaway. Think about what would make your guests comfortable, because the quality of conversation is definitely influenced by that. So like you said, you think about the fact that, are they going to be hungry? Let me just at least have that option available to them. And I noticed that. I actually noticed that when I noticed how comfortable Anika was on your episode.
Yeah,
and I was
she
like,
had food afterward though.
She ate after. Yeah,
No, I
but
had
she was
lassi
chill.
and I was chill. And I also I knew Vinamre because we worked together at India Art Fair. So I always knew that at least the conversation register was going to be very interesting.
Yeah.
Because he'd worked for the fair and I'd also actually heard his podcast. I remember I was researching on something and I was looking for this person's interview. Actually, it was Sumit Roy's interview.
Yeah.
And by the way, we're very excited, everyone who's listening. Sumit Roy is doing a show. We're totally
13th,
plugging
16th.
it in because we love him. He's a rapper, painter, everything. This guy is everything. But yeah, I actually, the first time I encountered him, I encountered Dostcast was when I wanted to listen to Sumit Roy's interviews and he had interviewed him. But yeah, Mark, to his courtesy, I remember after I'd finished recording, there was one video that went viral, right? And suddenly I get a text from Vinamre saying that don't read the comments. It's fine. Okay. And I was like, okay, no. And then obviously I read the comments and people, I think I was talking about Japanese trains, right? And there are so many of these people who watch anime and everything and they feel like they know Japanese culture so well and bless them. But I knew what I was talking about. I lived there for like 2 years. It's like, I know. I was talking about Japanese trains and how you're supposed to use your phone or eat any food because it's a place to sleep.
Who was trolling you? The Indian audience
Everyone.
or Japanese?
I was not being trolled.
It
She
was the
being
most,
trolled.
I was being trolled. And that was the most viral video. It went super viral.
It's got
and
1.1
everyone
crore
was trolling
views.
me and I was like, I'm okay with this. At least, you know. But he was super courteous and the thing of how he treats his guests is something actually quite exemplary. So I noticed that.
Thank you. I mean, I thought that I should make it like a hospitality business. We have a small saying that we recently incorporated to feel more corporate. It's called service above all. And
Sounds like DPS Mathura Roads.
what? It's like, oh,
Service before self.
Achha, it's that. I did not know that. I may have stolen that like subconsciously. But I made that as a motto for my team because I figured that for guests, even if you do podcasts online with people who are tuning in, that it's very important to at least have a 15-minute rapport building session before you start. If they only have an hour-long commitment that they can say to you, that's fine. Use the first 15 minutes to like get to know them. Why? Because otherwise it's going to go in then very stilted and jaded, and then it's going to take like the gods of flow to crack that 30 minutes in. And if it's boring in the first 30 minutes, 30 is a long stretch. If it's boring in the first 5 minutes, no one's going to tune in.
Yeah.
And also just like, I think there's something very weird about like anchor types. I'm just using that again. Is that they don't humanize the other person. There's like, these are my talking points. I will say this and you will respond back. Whatever happened to like the ping pong of conversation, that sort of died down. So I make sure that is in the, and also one thing I do is, that is something I learned from Tim Ferriss. I always ask my guests, what do you not want to talk about? Because some people some people that come on board, they've had pretty flamboyant lives and illustrious careers and controversies and things that everyone wants to ask of them and things that are they want to put behind. And it's not I'm not being paid by Star News to feature that. So I can, when they know, then they put their guard down. And then again, there's also some people who are like, let's you and I get very vulnerable, and that's so creepy. If you think about it, it's like,
that is creepy.
Like I want to get it deep into your head. Like, my God, you don't approach conversation like that. You start like, hey man, we're just going to talk about a bunch of things and see how it goes. I keep it light. And then the conversation contents can be intense and immersive. That's totally based on like what you're saying with your expressions, what she's saying with her expressions. Yeah. If you're guarded and speaking about something, I'm not going to talk about that because there's clearly something you don't want to talk about. But then if your eyes light up, or if you speak at a higher pitch and you're trying to like speak more than sentences would allow, it's a good point to stay on. So just like small little hacks like that.
Did you learn this in advertising school or?
No, I think
all these ad guys.
Yeah.
By the way, they are very quick and sharp and intuitive with these things.
No, I think I learned this. I didn't learn this in advertising school, by the way. They just made us do ads. But I learned this because I've been on stage all my life and I can't understand how audiences work. By the way, my knees still shiver when I go on stage still, which is why I hate doing events. I'll have like a podcast in a compact room, but I don't like addressing audiences like, you love me, you're awesome. Like, but you can just get better at it because you're sitting across someone and you're seeing their eyes. I mean, you guys are really hanging on to every word I'm saying, so I just keep saying it, right?
Yeah. You should. No, but there is the art.
About your age.
Yeah, that's like a no-go zone.
Just shut up. That's a rude conversation.
Anika, just accept
jealous
it.
of his age. Actually.
Just accept it.
Yeah.
But yeah, the art of conversation, and I think that's what podcasting is to some degree, right? Like it is the art of that.
Although you can be a horrible conversationalist, but a great researcher and be a fantastic podcaster. So you can really dig deep into someone's life and have the most interesting tidbits from not their life, but the field that they belong into, and then interesting trends in that field, and frame questions in such a way that it becomes very easy for them to put out their best self.
Yeah.
Right, and then edit thoroughly. In a conversational podcast is different.
How important is the research in this entire process?
Super important, dude. Otherwise, you're just like like when they talk about how news anchors are just like talking heads that don't really say anything. If you're not researched, you're just flying, and people can sense that. People can sense that you'll just say one open-ended statement about something. Hey, talk about that. What do you mean? Like, talk about that? That's too much pressure on me. And so, like with her podcast, for example, I went through her LinkedIn, then I searched the word Indology, I studied that. Then I looked at like what she was doing at the art fair. And then I also spoke with her, like what she's done, and she explained what she's done a bunch of times. And then I frantically read everything I could on everything possible in my documents before she came in. So I had and I also had been through 10 or 20% of the experiences that she's been through. So I could speak about them as well. One thing that people don't get, especially younger YouTubers, is that they sit in their house all day and then they do podcasts. So they have no skin in the game. They don't go out. They don't go meet people. They don't say do internships or a part-time degree or go to a different city. So all they have is like, yo, you know who PewDiePie reacted to this? Like, wonderful, great, that's internet culture, but where's life?
Yeah.
So
these are 2 tips, of course. Make your audience comfortable. Think about that. Do your research. But let's say, what would be your top 5 tips, or whatever? 5 is a way big number. Any top
5
tips?
ways to be an awesome podcaster.
5 ways to be an awesome podcaster. But yeah, like any tips for somebody who's just starting out? Any tips for like us?
Yeah, we've not started. We completed about a year.
We're 12 episodes old, you know,
Yeah.
13 episodes old.
For
So
you guys, I would just say, based on our previous conversation, just keep it as it is. Because for you, I'd probably like recommend leveling up, because you guys have already started. You know how to speak. She speaks on panels. You just spoke at it. You do your citizen stuff, so you're both well spoken. That's not the problem. You've also lived interesting lives. That is another problem as well. That is not a problem as well. For someone just starting out, I would just say don't pretend to be an expert. Because when I started out, all I was interested in is showing how smart I
That's
was.
so annoying though.
Yeah.
Don't you think so?
Yeah,
Like when
yeah.
you hear people trying to be an expert on things when really,
Yeah.
you know, yeah.
But it's like that Carl Jung saying, the fool is the precursor to the hero. So I would just say, just be earnest, right? If you're a 19-year-old and you really have not done anything in your life, just accept that and just, let the other person take the stage. The second thing is obviously try to avoid a Zoom podcast. If it's not possible, then get your production level set, because people have Zoom fatigue. It's a real thing. I mean,
Yeah.
you guys have probably been on Zoom calls throughout the pandemic. You hate that split screen, right? So you don't want to see that as a viewer because it's not aesthetically appealing. So get two cameras on either side and just get an editor and split it up. Most importantly, upload episodes no matter how bad they are.
okay.
Because the progress that you will make as a podcaster is going to happen in increments, right? It's like this saying, it's a marathon, not a sprint. I hate these cliches, but they're there for a reason. You get better over time. It's not going to be like it's not a film, right? Like, oh, my film came out and I'm a star now. It's like, oh, I did 200 episodes, now I can speak better, or like now I have a, industry standard, whatever. I guess like a fourth tip is, make a mix. Like there's this whole debate about like, should you do niches? Should you be a generalist? If you're like in your 30s and you've had a career, it makes complete sense to dominate that field by having a podcast in that field, right? Because then you acquire industry leader wali jo status hota hai, because everyone wants to be on your podcast. Like Vanika starts a podcast, except from this, like the Archaeology India podcast, and she gets archaeologists on, that could amount to a bunch of business opportunities that would not happen. So I think for the B2B people, or like people who are like not 18 or 19 or 21, a podcast is generally a way to network and get ahead in your career that most people miss out on. Probably like the last fifth tip that people should think of is like this saying, brunch magazine interviews at the end. Just have fun, guys.
Yeah, just have fun.
I do love those brunch magazines at the end.
They're awesome.
At the end, I used to wait for them with, yeah.
Okay, also we're running out of time.
Okay.
Unlike your podcast, Anika and I have capped ours at 45 minutes because
Makes
we feel that we're not that interesting beyond. I mean, you probably are, but we have this theory that we have sort of just decided is that we're not interesting beyond 45
I feel
minutes.
like we are curious by the beginning of the podcast, and then we're conscious by the end of the podcast. Like, okay, everyone's getting bored, shut this.
yeah, that's where it's at.
Although you guys who are, like, you're actually fitting the right industry standard, because all my friends who do podcasts, they're all 1 hour or less.
Yeah.
And their view or listen times are 80, 85. Listen times are 85%, 80% if they're not bad hosts, and view times are like in the 20s. Mine, since it's so long, some people tune out. But it is what it is. I've been told multiple times by growth experts, cut your podcast in half. But I was like,
No, but so many podcasts. I mean, like Joe Rogan talks for like 3 hours, and we all tune
I
in.
think
You know?
podcasts these days play a role in our lives as accompaniments to empty homes.
Correct.
Also, so like, for example, like I mentioned this before. I listen to your podcast and I start listening to it, and then I get about my business, and then I'm still listening, but it's like when you need to concentrate, you're doodling. Remember, you used to do that in
I
college.
doodle.
Yeah. But that's so. I think podcasts serve different purposes. Like, I want to have a thematic overview, or I want to like get to know this person, or I just want to hear this person speak.
yeah, I'm very happy with being background noise in people's lives, by the way, because if people are consuming it passively, that's a win still.
Except when you did Puneet Superstar.
Yeah, you can't listen to that
I
passively.
did not listen to it as background. I was watching Puneet and I was like, Vinamre, stop cutting to yourself. Just keep it on this guy.
Guys, I have to admit, I don't know who Puneet Superstar is.
Man, he is so
You should
funny.
find
I love
out.
him.
It's going to be a good guilty pleasure that you will have a hard time
I
getting
think
out
I need to
of.
go watch
Yeah,
that
yeah,
right now.
yeah.
But so Thank you guys. But also one other thing, Anika, you didn't speak about aliens in this episode. I just wanted to just let you know.
Are you a conspiracy theorist?
Every podcast episode, Anika has mentioned aliens.
Yeah.
You know, like even like for some unrelated reason, and I was going to wrap this up, and I just realized aliens didn't come up. That's how engaging you were. Thank you.
Because you mentioned it.
She didn't have to like resort to talking about aliens. Cool. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you for the next episode.
Thank you so much.